thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Isn't it time, once again, we all became just plain Americans? We founded a country on similarities, not diversities.
In this present crisis, government is the problem.
Rebuild America first.
I have a dream.
English only. But not one word of compassion for the overburdened American taxpayer.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
That life is so dear and peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery. And freedom has never been so fragile, so close to slipping from our grasp as it is at this moment.
You can't support the world while neglecting your own country.
You're tuned in to Patriot Watch Media. Okay, so thanks for joining us on another episode of Patriot Watch Media. Here we have very special guest, Michael Horn. Our sister Tamara's here. There she goes, coming up right here. But we have, how you doing, sister?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Not bad, not bad. Like I said, we have special guest, Michael Horn. We're going to bring him on here right now, get this party started. There we go. Let's just take a second. There we go. We go ahead and unmute him there. How you doing, Mike? How you doing, Michael?
Fine. How's the light in here? Do we need a little more light, or is it best to stay?
Well, your face looks pretty dark.
Okay, so I got to get a light. Would you turn one of those this way, please? Let me know if this is going to be any better momentarily. Whoa.
Oh, there we go. That's better. It's probably blinding you, though.
Yeah. What about this small one? We're going to try one that might be a little. Let's see here. Yeah. Let's see. One second. I'm going to get up and mess with this. Oh,
there you go. That's better right there, actually.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Good. All right.
So how are we doing?
Fine. I have a feeling Tamara's not too happy with me already. I can see that.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we had you.
We're going to get through all
Well, we had you on the show before,
yes.
And we have a lot new family members. So basically, have you introduce yourself and who what do you do, who you represent, kind of give us a brief synopsis of what's going on here.
Sure. And first, though, I want to actually thank you, and I want to thank everybody involved with this for having me on, because obviously what I do, what I represent has there's overlaps, but there's probably stuff that's really different or dissonant or what have you. And, right. All too often, quite honestly, when I get interviewed, it's from the UFO crowd or something or other. And I'm grateful for any opportunity to speak, but I'd rather speak to people who have, not been immersed in that field, which is full of a lot of silliness and disinformation. Okay, right. That being said, so I'm Michael Horn, and I've done a lot of things, but the thing that I've dedicated, for the most part, the past 40 years to is researching what's called the Billy Meier UFO contacts, which are going to be still ongoing in Switzerland for over 77 years. Billy Meier being a now 82-year-old man who claims that his contacts with human beings from another world began when he was a 5-year-old boy, and that these are indeed human beings, not so-called little grays or reptilians and all this other nonsense, and that there is a very long and deep connection to our world as well. Mm-hmm. Questions always come up for people, well, if this is really true, why don't they land? Why don't they do this, that? And while I'd be glad to address any of it, one of the reasons is that we, as a collective mass of humankind, of about 9 billion people right now, we are not in a place individually and certainly collectively where we could handle and would welcome the appearance of other beings floating down here from the sky, so to speak, operating completely out of any of the constraints of our military, our governments, our religions, our politics, our economics, our media. And that would just be far too terrifying for humankind. And so in this particular, in this case, which has actually been going on for a lot more than 77 years, as I, kind of have hinted before, this is a very, very long process in terms of trying to bridge a gap and to bring to us, without invasion, if you will, or inflicting or interfering, really, elements of information as well as evidence that we, if we choose to, without obligation, could examine, test, implement, if we think it's worth it, for the sole purpose at this point in our history of trying to assure our own very threatened future survival. Now, I can blab a lot about other stuff, but I'll leave it there so that you can ask, question, challenge, whatever you like, and we can try to see where this is and how it fits in with other people's, points of view and cosmology and the rest of it.
Right. I mean, well, Tamara, do you have anything that you want to? Because you weren't hosting on that. You weren't hosting with us on the last, the first time we did this. We had Michael Horn on here.
No, but I watched the video. I'm just kind of here to check out the prophecies tonight.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah, I think that if I caught it correctly. By the way, is the sound okay here or not?
No, absolutely. Yeah, you sound fine. Yeah.
Oh, okay. When I made a comment back, I think to Tamara here on my YouTube channel, the prophecies and prediction in this case, where I will sometimes say this dates back to 1951 or this to 1987. The fact of the matter is that there's a vast amount of prophetic and predictive information that is said. Again, this is something I can't prove the dating about what I'm going to say. I can prove it was published before the events, but it is said that a lot of this dates back literally thousands of years, and that those persons who originally, it said, issued these prophecies or predictions are names that we would know. And it gets into an interesting sphere there. So what I want to do is just try my best to address any of the questions or challenges about prophecies and how we know things are true, or if we think we know they're true. And what about, if any questions about the evidence in the case, and anything you want. I don't necessarily have all the answers, but I'll do my best from what my current knowledge base is, or I'll be able to, get back to you with stuff later or refer you to something.
Right. Well, the one thing I noticed, like, you sent us several links, and you're talking about how Meier again addresses the situation with Russia as he did last year, comments on the U.S. candidates for president and the likelihood of civil wars coming to America as foretold first in 1981, and then in the, if I pronounced it right, the Henoch prophecies.
Prophecies. That's Enoch. We know the name is Enoch from the prophets. Yeah.
Right. Well, I noticed it says here, again, with the link you sent us, that the number 286 is, yet the misery on earth will continue as two terrible civil wars will break out in America, whereby one will follow the other. And the one right after that states that afterwards, the United States of America will break apart and deadly hostility will prevail among her, which will then lead to the division into 5 different territories. And it cannot be prevented that the fanatics will play a dictatorial role. Can you explain those a little bit more?
Yeah. Well, first of all, when I said these were first published in 1981 and 87, actually, we can verify that more easily than we can verify that they were really written over 10,000 years ago, or first predicted by the prophet Enoch. Because if you read the article that's in the Henoch Prophecies, I think it's stated there because it's stated some other places as well, that these very ancient prophecies are presented to Billy Meier in German. By the way, these are English translations, but they're presented using the terms of the day that are what Henoch or Enoch was speaking about 10,000 years ago, when these countries didn't exist and many things didn't exist, but that it is said that this is exactly what he was talking about. And when we get into things in those prophecies about the destruction of the World Trade Center, we're going to go, well, how would somebody 10,000 years ago, let alone in 1987, be able to predict or foresee those things? So I don't try to tell people to believe any of this. I say, here's what it is. Here's what we can prove. Here's what we might not be able to prove. But if you go into it, the purpose of this, number one, is to get us to start to think for ourselves. And one of the foundational principles in this case is that true leadership from this point on in history, meaning even 20 years ago and more, isn't going to come from the top down, no matter who's sitting there. It's only going to really be coming and eventually emerge from the bottom up. There may be people in various offices who, for their time or for their country or for the world, can represent something that's of value or have good, but we have to learn to think and take back our individual and collective power based on real firm principles, some of which I'm sure, maybe many of which exist because you know more about it specifically in the Constitution. Some things will be maybe not mentioned there, but there's certain fundamental things. And we might disagree as to what or who or what granted certain inalienable rights, but we're told also in this material about those things that are the rights and the and the responsibilities, if you will, too, of human beings.
Right. Understood.
I don't know about the Civil Wars. Oh, that was a question.
Well, right. I mean, I thoroughly believe that. Because we're so incredibly divided as a nation that some people said, "Oh, it's going to be a revolution." Now it's going to be a civil war because we're so divided. Because when we look at everything, when a revolution starts, it begins and it ends as a revolution. It doesn't transition into anything. But civil wars can start as a civil war, end as a civil war, or they can start as a civil war, then transition into a revolution. And I thoroughly believe they're going to be, obviously a civil war, or in this case, with this prophecy, two civil wars.
Right. And, until fairly recently, nobody was talking about civil war in America. When I tell this all the time, I read this the first time in '86 because I read the '81 version and I was with another person and I laughed. I said, "What's this guy in Switzerland talking about? Civil war in America?"
Right.
Well, I'm not laughing anymore. And a lot of people, the problem is there's also, it was mentioned in a contact in 2012, it was really a reiteration to Meier of something they told him in 1975, which was that if the people of the United States of America don't correct the course they're on after 2020, and they don't give a day or date for it, but after 2020, the United States of America will, the superpower USA may cease to exist. Not that we're vaporized so much in my understanding as USA stands for United States of America.
Right.
So this whole thing of the long foretold actual civil wars could be upon us, and we're in the early stages of it already. So if you have events, let's say crazy people like Antifa, who demonstrably started a lot of very bad things and already have injured a lot of people and continue to do it, how, we can talk about who funds them or this, it doesn't matter.
Right.
That kind of action from the radical left will sooner or later get a reaction from the right. There are also people on the right who are as crazy as the Antifa people. And they don't represent all the people who have a right-leaning point of view. They're the radical right or the white supremacist. They're here. It's been a part of our country. We just have to be able to see things as they are and be honest about it. Well, those factions are, raring to go against each other and against who's in the way. It's like collateral damage doesn't matter to people that are going to go out there and, try to enforce their will and destroy the evil other side. So there can be foreseen or unforeseen triggering events that create an exponential bump up in seriousness, intensity, breakdown, anarchy, confrontation. And they're to be expected. They're going to happen. here, there, or elsewhere, as they will internationally because of the course we're on and the course other countries are on.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, according to the SB Wire here, again, it's another link that you had sent me or sent us actually. It says also, according to Meier, as of January 30th, 2016, there were already 17,461 sleepers in Europe who entered under the guise of being refugees, so on and so forth. But it says here also that Meier's also been empathetic that only through a cooperative international effort utilizing at least 300,000 troops can they essentially be defeated. This would involve a change in U.S. policy from provoking Putin into a possible third world war to one that emphasizes working together in mutual and rational self-interest to defeat the IS. Can you expand on that a little bit? I mean, a lot of these prophecies, it seems like Meier came up with this early on. I mean, decades before they actually even happened.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
I don't want anybody to think that he just now came up with this, you know?
No. In 1948, his first alleged extraterrestrial teacher, this man named Svath, gave him one of a series of letters of prediction. Now, prophecies and predictions are two different things. Prophecies are warnings about events that will happen if people don't change the course of action. And if people determine that those warnings bear consideration and action, then we can prevent a foretold event from occurring. If a prophecy goes beyond the point of no return, it turns into a prediction. Predictions being events that are said to be going to occur with 100% certainty, and they can very often be like events of a cosmic origin, an asteroid, coming through town here, that's another story, but there's one on the way that's going to probably hit Earth because people won't listen. Or certain events on Earth that aren't necessarily connected to man-made causes, though there's more and more that are, but a prediction means it's written in stone. So when Billy Meier published one of these predictions, I think in 2015, he started to bring out Svath's old information with things that we could then verify were not just written in 2015, but we would find out within a couple following years, oops, yeah, this is authentic, because those things that were not fulfilled in the letter when we first got it are fulfilled now. So, okay, so it was depressing to read. One of those letters, I was in Switzerland shortly after we'd published it, and I said to Billy, so did your teacher, did Svath get this through, consciousness powers and, some kind of spiritual? And he said, oh, no. He got it through time travel. I said, oh no, that's depressing. Right. Wow. Okay, so we'll just go along for a moment with the assumption about time travel that it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
You got these somehow. Okay, the point being, if it's true,
right,
it means these events will occur with certainty. And what was in some of those letters more than once from the 40s was Meier was told that there was a crazy woman who would appear in Germany as a major leader in the third millennium, pardon me. He would open the floodgates to Europe being overrun by migrants. The wave of migrants would contain large numbers of criminals and terrorists, as well as people genuinely seeking asylum from, bad conditions. But that this would just be a disaster. Well, in 1958, in the 1958 letter for Tamara about prophecies and predictions, Meier speaks about radical Islam coming to the fore with terrorism, worldwide terrorism, and all of this stuff. And then in 81, he specifically mentions that Paris will be burned down eventually. We've seen some of it, but not the whole thing yet. Paris will be burned down by radical elements from the inside before Paris is invaded by Russians and other forces, France being invaded as well as just Paris. It will fall to internal elements, which would be radicals of another religion, specifically radical Islamists, who are not really Muslims. we can say, well, this, that, and the other thing. Most Muslims aren't supporting it. Maybe they're also not doing anything to stop it. We could argue it, but radical Islamists, the terrorists, are just cold-blooded killers who are fanatics who want to do their crazy thing. And 3-4 years ago, I got invited by a skeptical professor to lecture twice, actually, at NAU, which is Northern Arizona University. And I think it was in November of 2015. And he sent me an email, which I have it up on my site because I have an article about this. And he's very skeptical, and he spent 4 months just going back and forth with me, checking everything. And one day we started to meet for lunch, and he said, okay, you've got to present this to my class. I said, okay. So he sent me an email because around November 15th, I think it was, or 16th, something like that, in 2015, there was some radical Islamist attacks in Paris, fires, and the whole thing. And he sent me an email saying, Michael, guess what I said to my wife when I heard about this? I'm paraphrasing because I'm not looking at my site.
Right.
That I told her I knew this was coming. So thank you, Michael. What he was referring to was I had sent him the prophecies about all this well before, obviously, they happened, because the prophecies were telling it long ago. So however it's being done, and actually, we have prophets right here on Earth. We call them meteorologists, stock analysts, sportscasters, architects, physicists, people who take known information and project it forward to try to determine future outcomes with varying degrees of accuracy.
Right.
So if there are human beings who have 8,000 years of technological development on us, they might be able to do some pretty tricky things. However, it's being, people could say, well, there are no extraterrestrials, this guy's doing it himself. Okay, I don't care. Somebody is getting information. We've got over 250 specific error-free examples of prophetically accurate scientific and environmental and geophysical world event-related information with no errors in it.
Right.
So somehow, okay, here's what happened for me. Just to one more thing, and then I'll shut up for a second.
No, you're fine.
Oh, okay. Well, when I got involved with the case, obviously in 1979, I'm seeing the UFO photos. Wow, and I was very curious. I start to find what I can. But then in 1986, I got almost 2,000 pages of the transcripts of the earlier 1975 to 78 conversations allegedly Meier's having with extraterrestrials. And wow, it's fascinating. I'm reading and rereading. In 1988, 2 years later, I open up a newspaper, and there's an article that says A-bomb testing tied to ozone damage, and percentages and stuff from Lawrence Livermore Laboratories in California. How do I know that already? How do I reach into my bed, pull out the first 100 pages, 1975, and they're beginning to tell him, and they're giving him the percentages, and I'm going, oh my gosh, what's going on here? That's what got me to start going back and searching. And also then I started to notice more, either in newspapers, because that's what was happening in the 80s, or radio or TV, new discovery about the connection between oil extraction and, and earthquakes and volcanic. I'm going, well, that's in here too. That's when I started to go, wait a minute, there's a higher standard of proof. I know the UFO stuff is real, but it's not what it's about. They're trying to tell us something. Then I went to, well, what's the reason? And then I determined for myself, it's to try to help us survive ourselves here.
Right. With all these prophecies going on, they're trying to, from what you're saying, they're trying to warn us here, essentially of our own demise. Now let me ask you this. I'm sorry, good.
No, I was just going to say, and our role in bringing forward our own demise. This isn't.
Oh no, absolutely. I agree with you. I totally, and actually, that's kind of leading what I was going to ask you here. It's kind of redundant. Anybody who's has half a brain, let's just be honest, understands that the whole global warming Al Gore was pushing was a hoax. And once that kind of calmed down for a period of time, and all of a sudden they come out with the climate change, but yet the funny thing is the climate's always changing, and hence why we have, the 4 seasons and just everything in between. But on another end of the spectrum, in a way, it's kind of like we know it's a farce, but it's kind of happening though, if you really think about it. And the reason I say that is because they're hastening it. They're the ones dropping the chemtrails. They're the ones that are fracking. They're the ones that are seismic blasting, the major corporations and governments. They're the ones that are just, I mean, dumping oil in the oceans and things. I mean, there are many things that they're doing that are actually destroying the ecosystem, and they're blaming we the people for having a car and merely breathing carbon dioxide like it's our fault. So, I mean, it's a farce because climate's always changed, but then again, they're the ones that are actually altering it. Now, did any of these prophecies talk about something like that?
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, let me just put a little caveat on this, because all I'm going to tell you is this. I'm going to, for the most part here, explain that according to the information in the case, this is what's in the case. I've done my own reasoning on it as well. And here's what I would say. Part of the problem with understanding and looking at the climate change, well, first I'll tell you this. In 1951, Meier began to publish, he's 14 years of age at that point. And that's when he starts to send information around the world. Well, pardon me, he's sending information, some or much of which he's already been told by his, in the 40s, his teacher. Mm-hmm. Now, here's what he says. In the future, human beings are going to be very threatened because of climate change, unnatural, man-made climate change and global warming, because climate change is natural, but it will be 75% man-made. And he says, in addition to what they will find out about the gases, there is the contribution from the atomic explosions, all this stuff. But they've given so much information on this. Here's the problem, one of them. See, everything gets politicized in our world, which is a terrible mistake, because life is not political. Human beings are political. Nature isn't political. It doesn't care about Al Gore, or it doesn't care about, Lindsey Graham or whatever. Life and nature simply are, and it operates according to very immutable, unchangeable laws. So here's about the climate change and the rest of it. And this is where, believe me, this is also another, oh my gosh, moment what I'm about to get to, because people are going to be ready to think, oh yeah, they're crazy. What they've said is simply this. Human beings have, for some time now, exponentially been overbreeding. No, it's not eugenics. No, don't kill people off, because we're doing that to ourselves. Well, man. What they've said is this. There are, for different planets at different sizes and the rest of this, optimal levels of population. Now, we don't know yet that there's other planets. So let's just go back to what are they talking about? They're saying, look, you live on a round ball. It is a finite space. You can try to go up, but you're only going to go up so far. You can only go out so far. And if you will stop to consider and look at nature, how nature works, basically, nature itself rarely creates that imbalance whereby the species are running into extinction because they've overbred. Now, some species can, but then another action takes place in nature where that species is brought under control any number of ways. Pardon me. Okay, so let me get to this. It is, and it made common sense to me. They said, look, if you keep doing this, this is at the root of basically all of your problems. Think about it. What are your wars and strife and all that about? About resource. Really?
Resources or religion?
Well, we'll get there too. That'll be just population. But it's interesting because it does lead to some interesting places. Okay, so they're saying, look, I did it this way, and I'll jump back to what they're saying. I've said to people, get a terrarium or get an aquarium and keep putting things in it to grow. Right. And at a certain point, it dies. This dies, that dies, because there's only so much in the balance of these fantastic natural functions, the creation of atmosphere. We human beings keep creating. we're vying for more resources because why? We have more demand. Now, let me tell you something that's going to surprise you. Billy Meier is let's just say he's the original environmentalist here.
Mm-hmm.
As you may know from my website, they are scathing. They write the harshest and say the harshest things about the Greta Thunberg thing and all these environmental conferences and environmentalists. And they're saying this is a waste of time. It makes everything worse. Not a one of these organizations, with the exception, I'll say this, of some small actions that thankfully can stop something that shouldn't be happening.
Right.
With the exception of that, they're useless. All they do is they create their fancy conferences. They go here and they go there, and more pollution. It's hypocrisy. It's done for the egos of people. And even electric cars further complicate and contribute to the environment. They said you may as well just stop doing that unless and until we're willing to say, okay, what's the issue here? It's such a touchy subject. I've got a right to have a child. I've got a right to have 10 children. Well, okay, but we're not thinking just of ourselves if we want to survive. We've got to go, well, you know, difficult times can often require difficult solutions. And I'm not the one. Well, what's the solution? Let's cut to the chase. Well, are you sure it isn't eugenics? Are you sure they're not Nazis wanting to kill? No. What they're saying is, if humankind, everywhere, if people were saying, let's implement birth stoppages, and they have all the graphs, they figured out how to do it, because we're not apparently also the only ones that have ever done this, whereby we can let the natural attrition, aging, decline, so-and-so is gone, let the planet breathe it, because then we give the chance for regeneration, because it isn't just about growing your food. That's hugely important. It's not just about the water, which is going to be like gold in the coming times, because it's so much pollution. It's not just about it's about the planet itself cannot, in its organic functions, dispose of all the waste products created not only by all the human beings, but we are having to breed more and more food source animals. Of course, Meier 25 years ago was saying the answer to this will be not that you don't eat meat, but that you culture it the way you culture cheese or tofu or whatever, which of course is now underway as well. And that it will be perfected so that we can have, because meat is for the human body, for the majority of humankind, is beneficial. It isn't beneficial to us to have to continue to breed more and more cattle, chicken, geese, ducks, whatever you eat, dogs and cats and snakes and all the rest, because there are the byproducts from the animals. You have the methane and all the rest of this. You've got the growing of crops to feed the animals. A lot of people are, dog lovers. I'm not particularly a dog lover. I like cats and all that, but a lot of people have dogs. Well, now we have a whole industry where animals that, as long as we're feeding anything with animals that could go to human beings, huge market is in animal dog food, cat food.
Right.
We are not even seeing that so much crime. There's so much that's tied to the overbreeding because we don't think it through. Well, isn't there a point at which multiplication also might involve, subtraction, natural subtraction? Because here's one last thing, and I get off on this one, but in predictions that Meier published about 2 years ago, he speaks about that there is a very big danger because the so-called elite, the power brokers of the world, many of whom aren't known. We can point fingers at people, but some of the real powers of the world, they're way behind the scenes and they're way powerful and wealthy. They get it. They know that things are not optimal for their own survival, and part of what they will work on an extermination, and they will take through their own funding for labs and all, they will have scientists breed race-specific organisms and all this stuff about send your blood into your DNA. You can't figure out what that's about? They didn't give a damn about where your ancestors came from, except to find out what's useful here in terms of if we want to target. The whole thing with biochipping, 1958, Billy Meier warned about it. think of people now in this country, workers in factories in Wisconsin, and the poor Swedes that think it's wonderful. Hey, I can wave on my hand here and get my groceries. Well, we're stupid. This is all about control. It's not the one people that are the most obvious evil elite. There are whole entities, if you will. They're not even political. They're power entities. So this is tied to, if we don't do it for ourselves, if we don't go, wait a minute, why don't we think about how much nicer it would be if we all had a little more breathing space, if people weren't clamoring to get into every country because they'd allow themselves to senselessly overbreed, because some of the countries, not all, some of the countries are just so religious, it's keep having babies because they can drop the money in the coffers of the church, which, pardon me, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but how is it that anybody in this day and age is giving a penny to the Catholic Church, which is infested and has been for centuries by pederasts and pedophiles and abusers?
That's right.
Marching around. Hold of the story, but that's part of this whole thing. And there's nothing going on in our world that we can't find connections to things that have been laid out in the Meier material. They're not pushed on us. They're there. You want to read it. You want to test it.
Right.
Don't believe it. Decide whether you feel it's true enough or it isn't. There's things in there that I'm not sure about. I don't just say, oh, Billy said it, therefore it's true. And I'm glad, because I don't want to be in that position. I'm sorry. I went on over one day.
No, you're totally fine. I mean, you touched on several actually very good topics, because I mean, the world has a disease, and the world is sick. There's a mental, I just say an intellectual deficiency, for a lack of a better term. There's a serious mental issue going on around the world. Some people can say it's prophecy. Some people can say it's Satan. Some people can say it's this. It could be a combination of everything. I mean, there's a little bit of validity what everybody's saying, but we're seriously, I guess in my opinion, devolving, if that makes any sense. Instead of evolving, we're devolved. We're going backwards. You know, it wouldn't surprise me here soon, that people start transforming, being even more retarded, but that nonetheless. But I mean, we see these things going on, and I was born and raised in Catholicism, and I am staunchly against Catholicism. I really don't care if it offends anybody, because it's the truth. That pedophilia runs rampant in the church, has like that for generations. To me, it's the largest cult on the planet. I think there's a lot of problems on this planet as a result. I mean, if you really stop to think about it, the number one death in this world is democide, death by government. And then the number two killer, or to say means of death on this planet, is religion. It's always the my God is better than your God syndrome, and it's just one conquest after another, and emperors and kings and queens and presidents and other governmental entities are destroying each other. And and when you look at all the problems of the world, it all is based off of greed for money, greed for power, greed for resources. Greed will be the downfall of man. Now, did any of these prophecies talk about and express their concerns about the greed of man per se?
Yeah, you sure? It's funny, not funny, haha. You mentioned that.
Yeah,
I'm going to tell you why, because you said greed, and of course there's a lot of talk about that in the material. But I'm going to tell you something, because in the early 1960s, as a teenager, whatever it was then, I was seeing buses drive. I was in Chicago, lived in Chicago, and the black smoke is belching out of the back of the buses, and I was saying to people, the dinosaurs are coming back to get us, And a few years later, when I lived in New York, I graduated from art school, and I'd gone to New York, and I'd started this fashion fad of fingernail art, and I was writing song. I wrote a song called Captain Tim about space heroes from the 50s, and it was put out on A&M Records. And with a couple friends, we did an episode for an animated, a proposed animated show. And I'm going to tell you what it was about. It was about air pollution. Now I'm going to show you something that I took out, because I actually saved these things for myself. I'm going to eventually use them in a little bio thing, but I'm going to show you this. I don't know if you'll see it very well, but I'll try, okay? So,
okay.
We got greed coming. Greed's coming. Yeah. All right. All right. So here it is. So we did an illustration, and that was about this planet in space. It was this square cube-shaped planet called Q plus for some reason, honest to God. And it was being invaded, they thought, by the dreaded, the dreaded little pollutions. These were these little guys that were belching smoke and everything, descending on the planet, and the people there couldn't figure out what was happening and why. And Captain Tim and his space hero friends, 1968, we did this, were on their way to solve the problems on the planet in their spaceship, which was like the Washington Monument with butterfly wings. But they were attacked in space by a meteor shower.
Ah.
Yeah, meteor shower, there it is, right?
Yeah, literal shower.
A literal shower. And the guy showering them, we called him, and this is where we finally get the payoff for why I'm doing this. His initials were NME, and his last name was Greed. And he was enemy greed. And that is the enemy of humankind. And if you think about greed, it's so funny because it's based in fear, and it's based in fear of not enough, of people feeling they don't have enough, they won't have enough, unless they amass more than they can, in many cases, ever utilize. Excessively unnecessarily excessive. And this infects, not only does it infect our thinking, but we tend to value it. We promote. We idolize and make heroes out of people who are millionaires and billionaires. And okay, we could go another way with that conversation. But this whole thing, instead of what's at the core of the Meier case, is something they simply call it the spiritual teaching. It's not religious, and there's no beliefs or superstitions or ritual. It's simply a teaching on thinking, really, and learning from our own thinking, how life works. And life isn't about hoarding; it's about being prepared. That's for sure. Being prepping, being prepared for things. But it's not about an amassing to protect and buffer oneself by having to have more than anybody else and getting it at any expense, usually the expense of others. So long as we are trapped in this kind of thinking, so long as greed is so foundational to what we even worship in our world, we are going to bring down upon ourselves, like on that planet, we bring down some bad things on ourselves. We will not be able to solve them utilizing the same thinking and beliefs that have all this time.
Absolutely. I get it. I get it. I mean, I know here in the, what was it here? Number 251, it says, sure, it's just that they still haven't found their completion because the most severe events are yet to come. Now, what do they mean by they haven't found their completion? What was meant by, for that we as humans haven't found our completion? Is that what they were referring to?
I'm not looking at it right now. If you wanted to, can you read back on that sentence?
Sure. It says, it's number 251. It says, sure, it's just, I'll read the whole thing in its entirety. It says, sure, it's just that they still haven't found their completion because the most severe events are yet to come. And to be sure, sectarian murders and mass suicides, as well as religious, murderous riots, neo-Nazi terror, and other terror through the right-wing and left-wing radical elements and groups.
Right. Well, first of all, if they were speaking about that prior to that in terms of prophecies and events and all of that has not yet reached its completion. That is underway. I mean, we could certainly, as I say, I don't know what sentence was right before because I'm not looking at it, but we have not seen anything yet, unfortunately, because the way this is described in the various prophecies, and if you look at what's called the predictions of Jeremiah, oh my goodness, it's going to be very bad. And this country is not, if we continue the way we don't survive. It's just that simple. And this transcends any beliefs. It transcends politics because beliefs in politics have co-created the mess we're in. We either find out what's real and start living in accordance with reality and the laws of life and creation, if you will, or we keep trying to enforce our will and our beliefs and everything, meaning all people trying to enforce, like you said, my God, this guy. It doesn't work. We don't live in that. Universe doesn't support that. It just doesn't work.
No, I completely agree. Is there, I mean, now I know there are some prophecies that have come true, apparently. That I mean, can you maybe hit some hard, heavy ones that a lot of people might be familiar with that were like that major events?
Oh my gosh! Well, you know, there's so many. I have to. Okay. Well, first of all, this is when I say this, we have to, for a moment, assume that it's true that the man published this before they happened. He foretold the fall of the Berlin Wall, the 2 U.S.-Iraq Gulf Wars, the second, and specifically said the second one will be led by a president who will be the son of a former president. It will lead to great disasters and terrorism. He specifically foretold, and some other people, by the way, some people here and there can foretell things. He's not the only person, just that he's got hundreds and they're all been right. He foretold the use of plastic credit cards, the AIDS by name, and its origins, its real origins and all of that, the carrying of portable phones. He predicted that everybody, and this is, again, 1958, when television was just emerging strongly, he said not only will every home have a television, but they will have computers which will be interconnected worldwide, electronically. That sounds to me like the internet. Sure. He said that people will lose their ability to determine what is real and what is not real through phantasmagoria because of how advanced the visual arts and things will become. He foretold, in that same document, the radical Islamist terrorism arising, prostitution that would become legal and taxed, the exploitation of children, the murder of children, the hunting of children, the organ harvest. I mean, then you get into the scientific stuff. For instance, as on the other spectrum where we're not talking just socially, I don't know if I mentioned last time that my girlfriend and I went up to the USGS here in Arizona, and I took an impromptu meeting with a guy, very nice guy, as I say, a scientist up there who was heading up the Mars project, the rover and everything on Mars. They headed up here from Flagstaff, and I just walked in with a bunch of stuff, and I asked to see him, and he came out, and we had a little conversation, and I gave him printed paper, and I said, well, this information here was published before NASA discovered it on Mars, all about Mars and stuff. I'd like to look, and and he emails me maybe a week later saying, well, maybe the man's a lucky guesser. I said, okay, I think he's a lucky guesser. And he says, well, this thing about lightning on Mars, I don't recall. He's a scientist telling me this. I don't recall anything about lightning on Mars. So I went online and I found, by searching around, that scientists had discovered in 2009, NASA did detect lightning on Mars. Well, why did we talk about that? Because 20 years before that, Billy Meier was describing it. Right. And in this document, which I posted all these specific prophecies online. I've got a thing that says, how did he know before the scientists, right? Right. Oh my gosh. He knew because they took him there and they showed him stuff and they gave him information. Now, these kinds of things with the science, they're not going, we predict. They simply told him things conversationally. In that same conversation, at one point, a guy said to him, this was from the 1980s, guy said to him in 2001, they will have the Mars what is the thing called? I forget what it's called. Mars Mission Observer or something in 2001. Right. It's called that. And this is what they named it in 2001. We have so much of this. Suffice it to say, if anybody's curious and they can't find enough on my blog or on the website, I'll send you links to all this stuff. There was just one that I put up a few weeks ago. NASA discovers this thing about the damage to brains that will occur from space travel, even from traveling to Mars. Meier published that 39 years ago or something. You
Right.
know, and we got it. It's there. We have stuff in books with copyright dates. This isn't like, you know, mystical stuff. It's right there. We can prove it. Now, what are you going to do? So this is why the UFO community hates this case. And they don't like me too much either, because we don't talk about imaginary aliens and abductions, which, if they happen, they're secret military. They're not done by extraterrestrials and all of that. So this kind of thing it's so crazy that the people that claim to be most interested in extraterrestrial hate the truth. They don't want to find it.
Right.
And skeptics hate it too. I just had an encounter with a skeptic. He tried to debunk a film, Meier's earliest film. He was so desperate to debunk it, he just did this crazy, superficial, stupid thing. Obviously, they can't duplicate Meier's films even to this day, actually. Certainly not using... Okay, so there's just so much here. That's the whole thing.
Right. Understood. So just so everybody knows, just in case those that are tuning in or maybe they forgot or anything, but let's talk for a second. Where do these prophecies come from? Just to catch the people just tuning in up to speed. Where are we have you or where, these prophecies we're discussing? Where do they come from?
Okay, there's a few ways. Now, as I said before, let's say the Enoch prophecies or the predictions of Jeremiah. Well, what we're told here is that these people that we know as quote unquote biblical prophets were actually performing a similar function to what Billy Meier does today. They were prophets, but they were in contact with, of that time, people from this particular race who have had a very, very long term, obviously, 13,500 year, you can say, mission to try to help the developing humankind on Earth without screwing it up.
Right.
Because others have done that too, have screwed it up. Okay, so these prophets got their prophetic information from one of a couple ways, which is they were either very gifted seers, and Meier has those abilities himself, or they were shown this by the Plejaren people of the day through time travel or screens, whatever, and they were told what this was and that they should warn the world. Well, the explanation of that people can do with what they will. What has further been said is, look, as I mentioned, we have astrophysicists, we have architects, we have all these people who take known information, crunch it, and make projections. Well, if these people are real, they've got computers that are really good. It's like they've got little, 90,000 terabit things that are this big floating around. Okay. And they have pretty sophisticated technology. They also have something else which are called telemeter or telemeter craft, which are small monitoring devices that have existed for a long time that go around the planet gathering information. Now, that isn't, the source of the earlier predictions, something else. But I was within about 20 feet of one of these little things when I lived in the mountains of Brazil. I told that story before. Other people I know, they've all seen them in Switzerland because they come over that area. They're monitoring and gathering. Okay. So they are taking and crunching information in ways in which I'm not so sure. I don't, it's beyond me, but they're doing it. And then time travel, then people whose consciousness is tuned to being able to focus into varying degrees of accuracy on future events. So we can do with that whatever we will. We don't have to believe any of it. We can say, here's this. It happened then. We know it was published here. However they're doing that, what do we do with it? Why?
Right.
What's the reason for it? And to me, the reason is to help us recognize that more advanced people than we, who are not here to dominate, attack, or invade us, they're not here to come down and save us either, but they are dropping into our world evidence of their existence, oblique, of their development. UFOs are cool, but how do you know all this stuff in the future? And then they're dropping in this thing called the spiritual teaching, which simply says, look, if you want to know how to operate an advanced computer and fix it, here's a book. Here's an instruction manual. There's no beliefs in there. It doesn't say, we believe you can fix your computer if you just bang on this part of it. That's useless, right? So
Right.
you got to figure out, how does this thing work? What they're saying is, this is how the human consciousness, the mind works. This is how the emotions work. This is how parts of you that you don't know you are also work. And if you study this and go slowly, take it a sentence, a paragraph, a page at a time, and think about it. And then start to apply it in your own life and see what the results of that are. And on a recent blog, for instance, I talked about something that I experienced when we were in Switzerland in May. I don't know if you're familiar with that, with Billy and his fractured shoulder.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Right? Okay,
Yeah.
For those that don't know, as I said, Billy is an 82-year-old man. He has only one arm, one hand. The other arm at the elbow area is missing from that point down because it was basically ripped off the body in about 1965 in Turkey when he stuck his arm out a bus window like this, and somebody came by. Okay, bad news. Still has phantom limb pain and all that. So he can't do this. He has to do everything, all of his typing, 100 words a minute in German, one hand. So sometime last year or early this year, whatever it was, Billy fell. He's a kind of accident-prone guy. He gets more injury stuff than you can imagine. So he breaks his shoulder in a few places, breaks it. And they take him to Zurich, x-rays, and to the doctor, and the doctor says, well, because you also just had a heart valve replacement, another thing that happened, they said, we can't really operate on you because the fluctuations in blood pressure and all this stuff, it could just blow you up, kill you. Okay?
Right.
Sorry. We don't know what to tell you. So Billy, they go back home, and I posted a little photo, and I'd seen another photo was even clearer, where they put a band around Billy's arm to keep it attached to his body. So his only good arm and hand is hanging at his right side.
No.
It's broken. Okay, so we go there late May, and Billy comes into the kitchen, and he's walking around. I'm going, whoa, okay, your shoulder? Oh, yeah, it's all better. I can do this. He's waving his arm around. This guy had 82. He had his shoulder fractured in several places. Serious stuff.
Wow.
And so I said to him, I said, so Billy, The Might of the Thoughts, which happens to be a title of a book, but it is actually literally what the book is teaching, how your thinking works. He said, oh, yeah, The Might of the Thoughts. And so I said to him, okay, here's a question for you. Did you, when you were healing yourself, did you have to know how every nerve and connection? No. Just focus on the improvement. Using your mind in the right way, it will improve. It gets better day by day. This guy is waving that arm around, and there's no two ways about it. That's not the only thing. He's healed for himself. Some things are very difficult. He still has certain conditions like tinnitus, and he can only do so much with it. But this he fixed. So when we talk about a book that you might want to get, we're not talking about, it isn't just the hyper happy, whatever you think about you're going to have, it's going to manifest right away. The Secret, that movie.
Right.
No, there are steps in life for learning how our thoughts work, how we train ourselves, how we move forward with things. And then as evidence appears, it's not just all about healing. It's how does that improve your day-to-day life? How does your relationship with yourself improve, your relationship with your partner or your family or at work and all? What are the elements in your thinking that are creating this? It's mind-boggling. It's such a great freaking book. You can read it over and over for the rest of your life, as well as Meier's other books, which are all interconnected in terms of teaching, not belief, teaching. So that's a little about that. I don't know where we started with that. But
No, that's fine. That was actually great information. Because we are about at the end of our show. Is there, you want to have some websites you want to plug so people can visit them?
Sure. And it's just occurring to me to give something away too. So I've got a blog, which is W's, all the W's, theyflyblog.com. And I have a website, which is older, but it's got tons of stuff, which is just theyfly.com. So on theyfly.com, I have at least 100 articles of varying lengths that I did starting in about 2002. The blog, I now have over 900 articles on it, and all sorts of stuff, evidence. You know, Meier's case was authenticated, as I may have told you on the last show,
right.
by this. That military guy is now doing an in-depth investigation into everything in the case. He just wants to know if he can prove everything, because he proved that the UFO thing and the context are real. So here's the thing, if I can. Anybody that emails me and says, please send free, I'm going to send them a downloadable link to my own first little DVD that I did in 2004. Nothing fancy, but in it, I did it as a lecture with kind of PowerPointish kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. In there are some of the prophecies and predictions that came true since I put it out.
Wow.
Lots of information about all the different little areas in the case. Very, as I say, not sophisticated, just full of information for an hour and a half. And if you send me your email address and just say free, I'll know it came from your show.
Right.
And I'll send a download link for free. And then if people want anything more, that's fine. But I just want people to start their own view in here. And of course, if you go to the blog or the website, you're going to have so much stuff to research, and I answer on my email anyhow. So I don't know if I took time with that, but this is important for us. If we want to survive and thrive, we're going to have to do things differently.
Right. I agree. So the two sites are theyfly.com and theyflyblog.com, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Just make sure to double check and make sure everybody has that there. Other than that, we appreciate you for being on our show. It was an honor and a pleasure to have you back here. We'd like to have you back sometime in the near future again, you know, if you're willing. Yeah. You have anything, you want to add, Tamara, or?
I just want to tell everybody that every $1 a month helps. And if we could get some people on Patreon, y'all need to know that we have a monthly drawing. Usually pretty good gifts. We've done radios, Bofang radios. We've done camp kits. And we really need y'all's support. We'd really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'd agree with that. Everybody can visit our website at patriotwatchmedia.com. You can visit us at, like what Tamara was saying here, at patreon.com/pwmedia. And on our homepage on our website, you'll be able to see our merch store. So if you want to go there, you can visit that as well. But other than that, we will be back this Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern with the most absurd weekly news that you've ever heard. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate your time and you coming back here.
Tamara,
bye, everybody.
Thank you. Lisa, thank you very much.
Take it easy, everybody. We'll talk to you later.